In this episode of Coaches Chat, we had the pleasure to speak with Matt Gary on the podcast. Matt Gary is the co-founder and owner of Supreme Sports Performance and Training and author of the highly anticipated book, The Gameday Coaching Manual. We touch upon his introduction into specifically game day coaching, some memorable battles he's been a part of, including his time with LS McLain, and the legendary battle between John Haack and Brett Gibbz. We also touch upon Sheffield and his predictions for what's to come. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Coaches Chat just as much as we did with meeting Matt.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Coach Chats. This is the very renowned Matt Gary on our podcast today. How are you, Matt?
Outstanding. Thank you so much for having me.
We're honored to have you. We're very excited to have a few chats about powerlifting and your book and what's going on right now. But
likewise.
To start off, tell us a little bit about your background as a lifter and a coach.
Yeah, I think my background as a lifter begins in 1995. So that kind of dates me, if you will. I've been doing this for quite some time, having 28 years in the sport. And, you know, I played football growing up, and born out of football and kind of training for American football, became this interest in strength. And so I began competing in 1995. And of course, everything back then was equipped. So there were no raw competitions. So you could compete raw if you wanted to, but everybody was wearing squat suits and bench shirts and knee wraps and so forth. So if you chose not to, you were really giving people a staggered start, if you will, toward the finish line. And so, you know, I got my start in equipped powerlifting in 1995. And, you know, I mentioned that in my manual, and kind of how my inconsistency early on, you know, led me to realizing, hey, there's a better way to do this. But began competing in 1995 and competed and have been competing ever since. Probably the first half of my competitive career has been equipped, and then kind of transitioned into the raw stuff. And actually, for the last decade or so, I haven't even worn a belt. So, and I've just become, that's kind of been my fancy, if you will, is competing raw without a belt. It just kind of gets in the way, to be honest with you, the way that my rib cage is structured and so forth. It pinches me pretty badly, and I feel like I'm just as strong without the belt as I am with one. In terms of coaching, I think I formally started coaching powerlifters probably in 2000, you know, and I think as a strength and conditioning coach and having a background in exercise physiology, I think, you know, that's kind of the narrative or story, if you will, for a lot of us who kind of get started. We start competing, we're maybe writing, training, and programming and doing that for friends and so forth. And then it kind of gives rise to, or gives way to, doing it a little bit more formally. And so started coaching probably in 2000, and, you know, doing kind of the game day thing at local competitions, you know, and I think that kind of happened organically, because when you're competing equipped, you literally and figuratively, you need somebody in your corner, because you're not going to put on the equipment, you know, all by yourself. And so, you know, it kind of was born organically by going to these competitions, and you go with your friends, and if they're doing an equipped one and you're not, then it's kind of an unwritten rule that you're going to go and help your mates, and you're going to go and, you know, help them out at the competition. So I started doing that in and around 2000. And then kind of my introduction to national team coaching and coaching at the international level was in 2003. And of course, that's kind of highlighted in my book a little bit as well, you know, where I traveled with my then friend and now wife, Susie Hartwig Gary, to the Open World Championships in Chicago. Of course, again, that was equipped, and helped her and basically served as her personal coach that day, and as an assistant throughout the week to the head coach. And every year after that, when my wife, you know, when Susie would make a national team, fortunately, my performance was good, and I was invited back on as an assistant. So in the beginning, it was just sweat equity and labor, if you will, pulling up straps, chalking backs, wrapping knees, etc. And I'm just literally and figuratively this sponge trying to soak up as much as I can, because I had no international experience, quite frankly, out of my element. But yeah, so kind of born in 2003, and it's gone onward from there.
So game day coaching kind of just organically started happening when you guys were all in the scene kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like I said, when you're competing equipped, you need this fraternity and sorority of, this brotherhood and sisterhood of helpers. I mean, you can't do it on your own. Competing raws, of course, in classic is a lot easier, but equipped, you need help. I mean, you can't go to a competition and do all that stuff on your own. So that's kind of where it was born. And then a decade or so later, you kind of get wise and say, you know what, I'm going to all these competitions and coaching all these people. I deserve to be compensated for my time because I'm doing this, and granted, it's a labor of love. I mean, we're all in this sport because we genuinely, it adds value to our life and we love it. But by the same token, it's so time consuming and depletes so much of your resources in terms of time and energy that, we ought to be compensated for our efforts.
When you leading up to a competition with game day coaching, do you have like a process that you go through with other coaches?
I do. So just in the spirit of transparency and authenticity, I don't do a lot of programming anymore. I'm kind of programming averse, to be quite honest with you. I did so much of it for so long, and it became just so laborious for me, and really wasn't adding a lot of value to my life. And as the game day coaching stuff took off and I became more known for that, I'm like, man, this is where my passion is. This is where I want to pour my efforts, is into the game day. It's cool to see the journey of how people get there, but we could have 10 people in a weight class and they all got to the competition a little bit differently. Some people use the traditional periodized approach with percentages. Somebody might be using RPE. Somebody might be using a conjugate method, but really where they're measured is on game day by their game day result and their product. And so I always felt like that's where, in my opinion, that's where I wanted to be my very best was on game day and doing the game day coaching. So to answer your question, yes, I do collaborate with other lifters coaches before that. So you asked me about my personal process. And so when we have a lifter who reaches out to us, who clearly we don't do any programming for, I immediately open up the channels of communication, right? There's got to be some two-way communication. And naturally, if they have somebody who's writing their training and doing their programming, I like to invite that person into the conversation as well and say, hey, look, we're going to be competing in 12 weeks. Let's open up these channels of communication. And, with your permission, I'd like to get my eyes on their training, their videos. And so obviously, so I have an idea of what they're doing, et cetera. And we kind of follow that and track that all the way up to the competition with obviously the peaking block, the last, 2 to 3 weeks and what have you in the taper period being the most important. And so, and then naturally we to install the game plan, to officially install our plan, we hop on a conference call like this, a video conference call. We've got all the videos in front of us. We've got our, worksheet in front of us, and we collaboratively go through that. And clearly, as you ascend to higher level competitions, nationals, internationals, that takes on a different shape and a different flavor because you're considering a host of scenarios that could possibly happen. You understand who you're competing against, what the objectives are, et cetera. When you have somebody who's just going in for fun and to hit PBs, then that conversation is going to take on a little bit different tenor and a little bit different flavor. But that's typically our process. So then, once we huddle up and we install the game plan, we're good to go. And then of course on game day, when we arrive, myself and or my wife, Susie, we like to think that it's white glove service. I mean, we literally handle everything. The only thing our lifter needs to do is execute on the platform. I want to be, and that's not me trying to take this role of being a dictator or this authoritative ruler without any empathy. That's not it at all. It's just that I want my lifter to be solely focused on their execution, and I want to shoulder the burden of everything else.
Yeah, I like that. As an athlete myself, I like that idea, especially of just being able to, you have your job, I have my job.
Definitely.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Lifters have to lift, and it's incumbent upon you to go out on the platform and execute, and it's incumbent upon me to coach. I'm the coach. That's my role. I need to give you objective, real, critical feedback in real time. I don't need to stroke your ego. I don't need to have any emotional attachment to any other number other than the one that I believe you're capable of. And so
I think that might be a big thing too with you, just particularly game day coaching as well. You don't have, I mean, you have that emotional attachment there because you want that person to succeed and do really well. But because you haven't been there for the whole process and the whole build up, you aren't as attached to numbers. So you can, I guess, be able to just put something on the bar in the moment without knowing the whole process, I suppose.
Right, exactly. And so, you know, when there have been times where, like, if I've been a national team head coach, clearly we would invite the, you know, programming coach, if you will, the day-to-day coach, into that, you know, not just the conversation, but into the physical space. Look, if they've made the trip to the World Championships and they want to be a part of that, you know, who knows the lifter's lifting better than that person? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we clearly invite them in and look at, I think if we can get an additional set of eyes on the lift, you know, that could be a good thing. I mean, we don't want, you know, too many cooks in the kitchen, but by the same token, it is valuable to have another set of expert eyes on that lift, you know, with the understanding that, you know, maybe they're like, oh, my lifter has a history of sticking at that point during the lift, and, you know, but they'll typically have more kilos left. That's valuable information to have.
Yeah, definitely. Do you, I just heard before that you said, you know, that you have contact with some lifters 12 weeks out. Do you have like a cutoff that you have? Like if someone contacted you 3 weeks out or 2 weeks out, would you be like, I can't do this? Or
not? The short answer is no. I mean, to your point, and I think I can sense where you're pushing, right? I like data. I love numbers, analysis. So clearly the more I have to work with, it creates a better context and a better picture for me. However, I have literally been thrown an athlete at a national championships about 30 minutes before start time. Yeah. And quickly, thank God for the databases now, and thank God for, you know, social media and Instagram, run through a few lifts, run through the database, figured out what their previous PBs were, what they hit, and come up with a game plan, you know, in about 15 minutes time, you know, that has led them to a successful performance. Is that optimal? No, of course not. I don't like to do that. But no, I don't really give too much of a cutoff. I mean, we have lifters who contact us, and most people, they do the advanced planning, right? And they contact us well in advance. So we already know that we're going to be working with them. There aren't that many last minute people, but, you know, clearly if somebody misses a flight or somebody gets sick or what have you and can't make a championship and lifters are scrambling, as long as our schedule can accommodate it, we like to, you know, take on these people if we can accommodate them.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it definitely helps with building trust as well, especially if you've helped work with them over that 12-week period as well, right? So especially you working within the national team and you're working with like a large amount of these high level lifters, how do you feel like you manage the workload when you are working with like such a large number of elite lifters within a given week?
It can be tough. I'm not going to lie. I mean, that is a tremendous workload. And I'm a believer, like I said, in having a lot of communication. So I like to be able to check in with the lifters, you know, and understand where's their body weight, how are they feeling, are they dealing with any injuries or small niggles or what have you, and I need to know that information. And so it can be overwhelming. It's like when you're coaching on a national team, the only thing that people really see is that coach on the live stream, and they see them there on game day, but they have no idea the amount of time and effort that's been poured in on the weeks and months leading up to that competition. So it truly is, it's cliche, but it's a labor of love. And it is a tough balance to be able to do that. But I'm blessed that, you know, I kind of put programming or my own programming service really on the back shelf and on the back burner. So it does avail me of more time, you know, to devote to that craft and that duty when it's thrust upon me.
I think it definitely goes to show as well, like once you've put it on the back burner and you make game day coaching your priority and people see you as the game day coach, people are willing to, especially from like a programming to game day coach, like that person is willing to put that trust upon you as well, right? Like, because that's what you put your passion into and that's what you put your effort into, obviously they would trust their athletes as much as, you know, as if they were your own.
Yeah, I'm a very big believer in playing to your strengths and staying in your own lane. Unfortunately, you know, early on in my career, I thought I had to be, you know, pretty good in every facet of coaching. And I think now we've come to a time where there is more, where there are people who are very well rounded, but there are also people who specialize in one aspect. And again, I just like playing to my strengths and staying in my own lane. And I have no desire whatsoever to be the best in programming. I have no desire whatsoever to offer nutritional advice. I do, however, desire to be the very best that I can be at game day coaching. That is my absolute passion. It's what gets my fire burning and my motor running more than anything. And so, to your point, I love pouring in my time and energy to that. And fortunately for me, I'm blessed with a lot of lifters who execute at such a high level. So it's been fruitful and it's paid off for me quite well.
How's it
Yeah, for
changed
sure.
with social media and evolving?
Well, it's changed tremendously.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I'm dating myself, but let me just tell you what happens in 1995.
That's where I'm going with that.
Yeah, this is pre-internet. So again, and again, people who haven't grown up without the internet or haven't grown up with a smartphone, I'm not, you know, I don't want to sound like that grumpy old man, but they have no framework or no context or no ability to understand that because they've always had that thing. So I've lived across an era where we didn't have that, and now we do. And look, I'm not a Luddite who casts off technology. You know, technology is wonderful. It advances society. It makes things better. But in 1995, when I started, you learn about a powerlifting competition by being at a gym or a community center or a rec center and literally seeing a flyer on a wall. I mean, who advertises for anything now with a flyer on a wall? You know, you don't, you know, or word of mouth. I mean, now in the age, and it's a blessing. I mean, it's a gift. Now you hear about everything on social media. Furthermore, back then you were coaching blind. There was no such thing as scouting. You didn't know anything about any of the lifters other than their last performance. Here in America, we had a publication called Powerlifting USA, and that was like the powerlifting journal, and it came out once monthly. The problem is that when it came out, it was like on a time delay. So you were getting results that happened 3 months ago or something like that. And so you never knew what somebody was capable of unless you knew somebody like a training partner or a coach, and you had an anecdote. You had a phone call with somebody who's like, oh, this lifter's bench training is exploding, you know, but you didn't know the roster until you showed up to the meet. You had no idea about the flight assignments, lot numbers, none of that stuff. And so now that's a blessing because you can see the roster. Many times you'll know your lot number until you get to international. They announce the lot number on day of, but like next week at the Arnold, I already know my lifters' lot numbers. So that's an advantage. I can begin to think in my head, you know, of what their lot numbers are. I know their platform assignments. I know everything. And then, of course, to your point with social media, for those who are willing to bare their souls and open their playbook, you know, and show me what they're capable of, you know, which I don't recommend, but that's just the old school nature of me speaking out. You know, then I can scout people and I can find out what they're capable of, what their tendencies are. And again, having these databases they're wonderful because I can scout the coaches too. You know, I'm not just studying the lifters, I'm studying the coaches. So it's really changed dramatically.
It's definitely helped you like build up your deck, as you've said in the past.
100%. I mean, I look for every opportunity in every way to leverage the rules, to leverage social media, to leverage the schedule, all of those things that are out of my control. I try to take them. I don't focus on them because I can't control them, but I'm mindful of them and then use them when I can to strategically leverage to my lifter's advantage.
Yeah, for sure. So
Love it.
going off that, like you've been a part of so many battles in the recent decade, right? Is there a memorable one that comes to mind?
Well, there are so many that it's hard to recall all of them. I suppose one of my favorite battles and I did mention it in my book, was the 2017 Classic Worlds, with LS McLain was our 93 kilo lifter. So, LS made the national team that year as an alternate. He didn't win nationals. So Ashton Ruska won nationals that year, but because of Ashton's, I believe he had a conflict with his military service and obligation, so he couldn't go. LS, I believe, was ranked as our fourth alternate. So he got on the team because some other people didn't go. And, Belarus was not naturally the most attractive destination for a powerlifting competition. So LS wound up going. We had 293s that year. We had Dave Ricks, of course, legend, and we had LS McLain. And so my wife, Susie, was the head coach of that team. And so in the spirit of fair play and integrity, we split those two lifters, right? You can't play chess against yourself. So it's not fair for one coach to handle two lifters, particularly when they're so closely at the close strength levels. It's one thing if you have two lifters who are, significantly apart, but when you have two lifters who are vying for a world title and who are close, you can't play chess against yourself. So I took LS McLain, my wife took Dave Ricks, and I was able to coach LS. He was, I don't recall where he was on the nominations, but he was in 8th place after the squats. We moved up to 2nd place after bench because he's such a prodigious bench presser. After our opening deadlift, we were in 3rd. After the 2nd deadlift, we dropped to 4th. And then I had a lot of decisions to make about our final deadlift. And so we're in 4th place. And of course, as a coach, I'm thinking, look, we're at a world championships. And so we got to get him on the podium. So I absolutely have to get him on the podium. So I have to give him, and because he's not a prodigious deadlifter, if you will, I have to give him a surefire make and a surefire high probability attempt for his 3rd. And then we have to let the deadlifters go after us, because it's easy to go out there and throw a weight on the bar and he misses, and then we're no better than 4th. We're still in 4th place. So I have to ensure that he makes his lift, force the hand of these other lifters so that he can get up onto the podium. And so with that, we did that. We only progressed, I believe it was 10 kilos from a 2nd to 3rd attempt. And of course, I detail all of this in the book. And he made his attempt. And Ellis was very, I saw Ellis this past weekend. He and I are very good friends. He was very upset with me, very angry. The athlete in him came out. He knew that he was capable of more. His preparation leading into the championships showed more. There was training evidence that was there that showed more. But I had to be mindful of the situation that I've got to get this guy on the podium. I can't let him miss. So we went up 10 kilos. I knew that his anger would bode well in terms of adrenaline. And so he goes out on the platform, annihilates this 3rd attempt, won't even make eye contact with me coming off. And I'm just like, just wait, my friend, because with the remaining deadlifters, every time that they miss, you move up a spot. And so literally that's what happened. And, with a little bit of luck, we ended up in that gold medal position. And so LS won the gold medal when he really was the 4th alternate and had no business being there. So that, in and of itself is one of the most memorable matchups that I've ever had and ever been a part of. And it just, it just warms my heart because he's such a good guy. And so I was really happy to go through that battle with him. Against him, Anatoly from Ukraine was lifting back then and was an up and comer. And so we were able to beat him. And so it was just a really cool situation.
Sounds like it's definitely evolved since you started lifting yourself, right? Like back when you started, you were just essentially maxing out and trying to go beyond and having expectations on a number.
Yeah, and that you said it, right? I mean, that's literally what it was, because the talent pool wasn't deep enough. So you show up to these competitions and it literally and figuratively was a test day or a max out day. And if you're so much stronger than your competitors, there's really no threat for them to come in behind you and kind of steal your thunder or sneak up on you. So your strategy was much different. Oftentimes you would open and people would just go straight to the PB, with the thought in their mind, they try to rationalize, well, if I don't get it on my second, at least I have a shot at it on my third. And I think we all know that rarely works.
Yeah.
You rarely miss a PB attempt on your second, at least on strength, and come back to get it on your third attempt. So, there is a better way, unless there has been a really long gap between competitions, unless you've moved up a weight class or had a significant training breakthrough, you really should or ought to, in my opinion, save the third attempt for the shot at the PB. The second attempt needs to be a total builder. It needs to build the total. It needs to enable you to score more points if you kind of liken kilos to points. And then the third one is for building the total as well, but for hitting a PB if it's there.
Yeah, for sure.
If you want, touching on the growth of powerlifting itself, because you said in 1995 when it was purely just equipped, and you need training partners around you, put the gear on, help you with everything like that. Danny wouldn't know, obviously, and then we move on. And you see this growth, right? And do you think that because of the ability to be able to train more by yourself has played a role in the growth of powerlifting itself with the Classic?
I do. I really do. To your point, I think there are three key reasons why we've seen powerlifting explode. And I think it's raw powerlifting, the opportunity, as you said, to do it on your own. There are fewer barriers to entry. It's cheaper than equip lifting, although, a lot of the raw equipment now, the Classic is getting quite expensive, but still, a pair of knee sleeves is a lot cheaper than buying a reinforced squat suit or deadlift suit or bench shirt or something. So anyway, there's fewer barriers to entry. CrossFit, as polarizing of a term as that is to a lot of people, has really been wonderful because it's placed a barbell in the hands of people that otherwise wouldn't even know anything about these lifts. And so CrossFit, and then thirdly, of course, social media, and for those three reasons, I think it's been great. And it's just catapulted powerlifting into the stream of consciousness of people who otherwise would not even know that, oh, I can compete at squatting, benching, and deadlifting. And so again, to your point, because you can train alone, there is that option to be alone in your basement or your garage, or even just train on your own at a facility. Where you don't need that fraternity with you, or that brotherhood, or that training crew, if you will. I mean, it's cool to have those things if you have them, in your toolbox or your wheelhouse, but it's certainly, you can essentially do it on your own. And so I think for that reason, yes, it has helped to increase the growth of powerlifting overall.
Yeah, 100%. And there is one battle I want to touch on. I'm not 100% sure if you're a part of it, but I have heard your wife might have been, and this is Haack and Gibbz.
Oh, well, yeah, sure. So yeah. I mean, that's of course a memorable one. And particularly so from a social media standpoint, right? Because it was, like Ryan Lapidat on King of the Lifts talks about that as almost the genesis, if you will, of a true social media showdown where you had two lifters kind of, going at it for weeks on social media, and then you had the sponsors kind of headlining this event, if you will. And so yes, so I played an integral part in that matchup. My wife, Susie, was the head coach of the national team that year, 2016 through 2018. I, of course, was her primary assistant. At the time, Joseph Franzo, I believe, was writing Haack's bench training. I don't believe he was doing the other programming, but I think he was in charge of his bench training. And so he was kind of the conduit, if you will, between Haack and us. And so all of us huddled up and installed the game plan. And that was really exciting. I mean, I think even Haack would admit at that particular time, clearly things have changed because of his, desire to go to the untested route. But clearly on that day, it really was unquestionable that Brett Gibbs's ceiling was higher. I think
100%.
Brett Gibbz was matter-of-factly the stronger human being. Likewise, in his matchups with Russell Orhe, I think he has a higher ceiling, at the time, than Haack had. But Haack was the better powerlifter. He just made more attempts. And ultimately that's what happens at these high-level competitions. I hate to sound like a broken record, but I talk about that in my book. But it's clearly the number one asset to have is to be the strongest lifter, right? Because strength is matter of factly what we're after. That's the greatest asset. But that doesn't determine who wins. And oftentimes it is the lifter who makes the most lifts. And Haack executed like a pro. And as I recall, I believe we went 9 for 9, made all of his lifts. And Brett, Brett didn't. His coach at the time, JP Couchy, who I'm friends with, really had to push his chips into the center of the table there during the bench press and risk it all. And he did that wisely. That was a good strategy so that he could be relevant in the deadlift. But ultimately, Brett couldn't hang on to that third deadlift. But that was a huge matchup. That was a huge win. That was an upset. I think everybody probably would have picked Gibbz, you know what I mean? Because he was the stronger lifter. But on the day, Haack was, was the better power lifter. So, that was a lot of fun to be a part of.
It was crazy to watch. I remember watching it at like 7 a.m. in the morning here, just streaming it live on my phone from Texas. And just the way that the whole day played out was it was a pivotal moment in my own kind of coaching game day kind of thought processes to see that unfold. Just like, okay, this guy's not going to win, and he's the stronger athlete right now just because this other guy's making his attempts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just watching it unfold was because another part of my own kind of like the way that I got so bought into game day coaching was just learning the rules itself, because I did a reffing course when I was like, oh wow, okay, there's so much here that can dictate a role in what happens. And then watching that, I think it was only a couple of months later, I was like, okay, whoever's coaching John Haack right now knows exactly what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, I would love to. I mean, I should give my wife credit, in fairness. I mean, really, it was a triumvirate, if you will. I was right there by her side the entire time, as she was the national team head coach, and rightfully so. She had the final call on all the attempts, and so she was the one submitting the attempts. But it was good. It was a three-headed monster of myself, Susie, of course, as the head coach, and then Joseph was there, kind of as Haack's official handler. So it was the three of us, and it's good because we had 3 sets of eyes on John's lifts, and we were able to maximize his performance. And so, as you said, 9 attempts are better than 8, 8 are better than 7, and so on. And so on that particular day, again, Brett was stronger, but John was the better power lifter. And so ultimately, and again, I try to teach people sometimes that if you can rationalize in your mind how lifting kilos is like scoring points, and we're just trying to score as many points as we can. You know what I mean? And you can be, as long as you're in the neighborhood, you may not have the most strength ability, but we can maximize the points. We can score more points than you through strategic attempt selection and to your point, leveraging the rules to our advantage, lot number and chips on world records and all these sorts of things and body weight to our advantage so that we can stack the deck in our favor.
Yeah.
I think you've definitely had like an influence, whether it's been like formally or informally, on the way like we game day coach as well, because we now have like the chance to also game day coach due to the talent pool being so similar now at like our local, state and national level now, whereas in the past it's just help people go 9 for 9 and have the chance for those PBs. But like you said, once it gets so close, and I think as game day coaches, like you get that chance to have a head-to-head battle with another coach, and that's really, really exciting, right? Because it's a numbers game, understanding what you think that other coach is going to be doing as well. But I think your book also touches, or it details all of this as well, and hopefully that helps to elevate the level of game day coaching up to a standard where everyone can game day coach and have this sort of battle. What was your goal going into it? Your personal goal writing the book?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I think you just touched upon part of it. I think I've known for a very long time that I wanted to write this manual. I became the USA Powerlifting coaching chairman in 2012. And that was after completing 5 head coaching assignments, and then actually intentionally stepping down when I was nominated or thrust into that role of coaching chairman and thereby the coaching education director, I thought it was best for me to step down rather than be in a head coaching role. And I was then going to be providing oversight to the national team coaches and revising our coaching certification program and therefore writing the curriculum. I felt like, I'd be doing my duties a disservice if I'm also throwing my hat in the ring and coaching a team. So I stepped down and just did that one thing. And as I'm contributing to the coaching curriculum, of course, I wasn't the only author. There were about 5 of us who put that together. I thought to myself, there's going to be a day when I want to put this into book form. I got to get all my thoughts out of my head and onto paper, or fingers to keys, if you will, and get all this information out. So I think that I've known that I've wanted to do it for many years. By the same token, that was in and around the time, around 2010 to 2012 is when I began studying the data and accumulating volumes of data, examining now to date over 17,000 individual performances, studying the data. So I also wanted to wait and kind of let that data marinate, if you will, speak to me. And I also wanted to allow my coaching career and game day career to extend before I actually, I wanted to get into more battles. I wanted to get into more scenarios, high stakes lifting and so forth, not just internationally, but at the Arnold and et cetera. And I felt like the more of those matchups that I could be in, the more credible I would become and the more data I would have to push forth. And so then to your point, one of the reasons that I wanted to do it was scarcity in the marketplace. There's literally there was nothing out there. There wasn't a resource out there for any coaches. There's plenty of journals and periodicals and things that and texts you can reference on programming and periodization theory and rehabilitation, prehabilitation, nutritional sciences, but really nothing on the nuts and bolts of game day coaching. And so, I really felt like there was scarcity in the marketplace, and I could contribute to the marketplace and to the community by putting together a resource, a formal text or manual where people could go back through it and refer to it and learn the rules, to your point, and understand how to leverage those rules. And so I wanted to do that. And also I wanted to uplift the community. Look, this is not going to become a New York Times bestseller, right? I'm not going to sell thousands of copies of this book, but I am interested in lifting up the community as a whole and, globally speaking, and then also the individual lifters and coaches. So to your point, they learn how to do these things, and there is a how-to manual. And so that's my hope. And then lastly, I just think that because this is where I've cut my teeth, and this is the thing that Matt Gary and SSPT is known for, I want to leave behind something that helps to define my legacy.
Yeah, I was just about to say while you were talking too, there wouldn't have been, I don't think anyone else deserved to do it, right? Write that book. You are the guy that is known as the game day coach. So I think it's the perfect sort of thing for you to do, right?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That means a lot. Thank you very much.
You deserve it. Moving forward, Sheffield, will you be handling?
Unfortunately, I will not. I was scheduled to coach at that competition. Again, just being transparent. A few months ago, before all of the wild cards were announced, naturally, I was holding out hope that my athlete that I do coach, one of the very few people that I do continue to write programming for, Ray Williams, I was hopeful, but not begging, certainly just so that people know I never asked or lobbied for or pleaded or did any of those things to try to get Ray into the Sheffield. We genuinely wanted to be invited based on merit, based on his recent performances, and based on deserving to be there. And so clearly, because he's been largely out of the IPF scene for a few years, that wasn't the case, and rightfully so. And so I never asked for any favors or backdoor handshakes or any of these types of things. And so he wasn't invited, and that's fine. And so we're really excited for all the lifters who are going to be there. Chance Mitchell, was going to use me, the IPF world champion. And so Chance and I have history. I had coached him at the Arnold early on in his career one time. And then of course he shadowed me in Colleen for that Haack Gibbz matchup. And he was kind of there and learning from us in terms of the game day stuff. And of course I've known Chance to be a great competitor. Last year, he and I hooked up at PA Nationals in Texas, where Jonathan Keiko beat him. But fortunately, Chance earned his way onto the team in the alternate slot. And then, of course, Arian Kamisi, who's a very qualified and capable and excellent game day coach in his own right, was able to help engineer victory at Worlds. So Chance had reached out to me and hired me, and that was the plan up until about the last week or so, when I found myself to be one of the first Article 14 casualties, if you will. So found myself on this ineligible list by virtue of the fact of me coaching at Powerlifting America Nationals last year, and then also going to our USAPL Nationals. That rendered me ineligible. I was in violation of the rule, and I wasn't going to lie about that. And when asked about it, I admitted it. And so I was, I became in violation. And so I found myself on this list. So that's the long way of saying that, no, I'm not coaching. I'm ineligible to coach Chance and ineligible to coach anybody. So Chance has made other arrangements at the Sheffield. I will, however, be there. My wife and I had planned on going over there anyway. We want to be a part of this historic event. We are 110% behind it. It has never been about me or the coaches. It is always about the lifters, about the ones stepping onto the platform. And we want to go over there and literally and figuratively celebrate this moment. It's awesome. And I think all of us, the powerlifting world, is excited to have their eyeballs in this event. And so I'm going to be in the front row cheering on the lifters. And I'm gonna be excited. And I think I'll probably have a piece of paper, and just knowing me, I'll be strategizing, and I'll, maybe even put myself in the position of coaching a few of them mentally, just for that exercise, if you will, and just really gonna just savor it. So no, I will not be coaching, but I 100% will be there, and I really couldn't be any more excited for all the lifters and for the coaches who are able to participate.
Well, you can
You've
have
got
your
me
phone
excited. Definitely got me excited.
Yeah, I
as well.
can't wait.
Yeah.
Looking at the way that they're kind of running it too, it's going to be different, right? Because you don't win based on having the highest total. You win based on beating it by the most percentage of the X total.
Nuts.
So it's a whole new strategy, whole many more moving parts, I guess. Like, and if we look down, we're going to look generally, like, if Taylor Atwell was healthy, he can smack his world record, and we've seen him beat 790.5 by a phenomenal amount before. Is he 100%? He doesn't let on too much on social media, but I think a lot of people know that he's not exactly 100% right now. So I think also he's at a disadvantage because he's a lighter lifter. And then if we look further on, we have Jesus, we have Chance, and we have the 105 as well, who will be deadlifting, Mickey D, who will be deadlifting more.
Sure.
So it's a lot going on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I think I'm excited. I love the format that they used. I really do appreciate the thought that went into this, Ben Banks and Pete Spence and the powers that be at SBD. I really think it's genius. I mean, because, I'm a fan, first of all. I mean, we all love powerlifting, but, I think what people want to see are these head-to-head battles, these head-to-head matchups. Nobody wants to pull out a calculator to figure, and when has anybody ever walked up to you and said, "What's your dot score? What's your Wilks? What's your best good lift points?" And dating myself, what if I said, "What's your McCullough score? What's your Glossbrenner formula score?" I mean, come on,
Jesus,
you know what I mean? So yeah, and we laugh, but it's like nobody ever asks you that. Kilos is the ultimate formula. That's the ultimate metric, right? Head-to-head battles, head-to-head competition. So I think it was genius to put this in play and say, okay, we're going to feature both a lot of these head-to-head battles that people want to see, matchups that took place at Worlds, these rematches, if you will, between Jad Jacob and Joy Namadi. It's going to be phenomenal.
Yep.
And then, of course, Agatha Sitko and Jessica Bittner, and then Carlina. I mean, good Lord, you know what I mean? It's going to be fantastic. And then, of course, for the men's side, you've got all those 93s going head to head. So I think that's going to be exciting. I think it's genius that SBD did it that way, so that it really does give, it gives not every single person an opportunity, because I think clearly there's a few people on the roster who really only have the opportunity to break an individual world record, and then I think just showcase themselves. And so I think those lifters probably will be aggressively going for the world records, in the disciplines that they excel at. And then beyond that, look, try to hit a PB total. Like if if you can only get a PB, a world record squat, and capture that cash, then aggressively go after that. And then beyond, because presumably you're not capable of breaking the world record total and being in that upper crust with those lifters, then put out a great performance, make all 9 lifts and show yourself to be a good competitor and a good lifter, and hit a PB total. But regardless of the scenarios, I think it's going to be, like you said, just wildly exciting, and just a lot of fun to watch for people who were there, and then of course on the live stream as well. I can't wait. And I'm gonna strategically, to your point, I'm gonna make a social media post after the Arnold, and it's gonna be geared toward the Sheffield, and it's gonna invite some conversation. But this is born out of a conversation that we had this past weekend at PA Nationals about the likelihood of people breaking the world records at Sheffield in total. And so I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I think it'll stir up some excitement. And I'm going to show some data and some statistics, and we'll see kind of how likely or unlikely that may be.
Got it all worked out already.
That's interesting.
I actually
everyone's
finished. I was just going to say, I actually finished running some of the data today. I dove into every single Raw World Championship. So Raw Worlds officially began in 2013, but I included 2012, which was the Raw World Cup, which, everybody who participated in that, myself included as a coach, we knew it was the Raw World Championships. It was just called the Raw World Cup. But I've run some data on every single one. So that's 10. So I've got 10 years, and I'm going to present those findings in an Instagram post. And, hopefully that'll make for some good discussion in terms of, how many world records we might be able to expect.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you comparing? Sorry, Steve.
I was just gonna say it's like shadows go against each other, because we have Chance Atwood trying to beat their own we have Eddie trying to beat their own world record total. It's like we look at a game like a Mario Kart or something, right? You're trying to beat your own shadow each time. It's kind of what it reminds me of Sheffield. They're just gonna try and click past their own best score.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I actually have asked about this. So, in anticipation of coaching there, because up until about 10 to 14 days ago, I was anticipating coaching there. I was like, I need to build a spreadsheet or a document on my end so that I have it at my disposal to do these calculations very quickly, so that I can enter the subtotals and begin to implement, enter in the deadlifts, and then see what is the percentage that they're, going to hit over the world record. I spoke with Pete Spence from SBD. I don't believe I'm letting out any information that is bad. This is good. Apparently, they are going to use lifting cast, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we use that in America. Yeah. And they are going to intentionally create a column, which is going to be forecast percentage over the world record.
Oh, excellent.
So the coaches, and I think people tuning in, will be able to see that. And I mean, you want that, right? You don't want to, again, it'd be nice as a spectator to not have to pull out your calculator, to have that right in front of you. And so me just being the person who always wants to have a backup plan, I'd already built this spreadsheet. So I was going to have that in my hip pocket and on my device, obviously, to be able to, type that in real time as kind of a backup. I mean, God forbid they didn't have this, even though they said they're going to have it. But it's going to be cool to watch this and to watch it on the scoring program. I was afraid that they were going to use Good Lift, which is typically what the IPF uses. And, I wasn't certain that they were going to build in some type of metric, but Pete assured me that they were going to have that built into the lifting cast. So it'll make it a
That'll
little bit easier for coaches.
Yeah, make it more exciting for us at home too, because we'll be able to see really quickly and
for sure. So it's, it is going to be exciting. I mean, I think, like I said, I think for those people who are capable of breaking the world record total, right? The strategy's got to be the strategy. I mean, if you've got some low hanging fruit there and you can cash in literally on getting a world record in an individual lift, of course, hit a world record, Agatha Sitko, take the bench world record, Carlina and or Jess, take the squat, take the deadlift if you can. But your name of the game is still, it has been, it is, and it always will be making as many attempts as you can, going 9 for 9, right? And maximizing that total so that you can increase your standing, because it's, and look, I think what we're going to see in the 93s and some of these other weight classes, they might even bludgeon themselves to death, just, body blows, and also look, because some people don't have a chance at the total, they might be just really aggressive, going for, so who knows? I mean, statistically, almost 50% of third attempts are missed in every discipline. It's 43% for the squat, about 49 for the bench, and it is 50 for the deadlift. So if we just looked at it from a normal competition, if we can say that that's what this, is going to happen, which is the statistic mean, that we can anticipate, misses because people really reaching for it. So, but it's going to be exciting.
Very exciting.
That's interesting. Going statistically speaking, right? I didn't realize that they were that low. The third attempts made was that low. Is that historically?
Yeah. So I mentioned that in my book. The data set that I examined began in 2000, and I wanted to make it as current as possible. So because I published the book this year, I collected data for a period of 22 years of data. So about 112 competitions, over 17,000 performances that I analyzed, as I said. And so those are the trends. Third squats are missed 43% of the time, 49% in the bench, and 50 in the deadlift. And notably, 24% of lifters miss both their third squat and their third deadlift. So if you just make your third squat and third deadlift, you're doing better than a quarter of the field. So, again, those are, for everybody who's not a bench specialist, those are the attempts that build your total the most clearly. And so you want to make those. And so it's wise to make them, even if they're 2.5 or 5 kilos under your all-time limit, to help maximize your total. So you always want to put somebody in a scenario where they have to walk out on the platform and beat you. I don't care if they have to go up 2.5 kilos. They could trip on the platform. The baby powder could mess up their depth, whatever. There could be a divot in the platform. You never know. I don't, Stephen, if I'm competing against you, I don't want to give you the competition by missing my third deadlift. I want to make mine. And then, hey man, ball's in your court. You go out and execute. Now it's your turn. And if you do, I'll be the first guy to shake your hand when you're coming off the platform. But I want you to beat me. I don't want to lose. I don't want to give you the competition. And so I think that's, people should compete with that spirit, force your competitor to go out and execute. And if they do, shake their hand. I never root for anybody to miss. I just want to lift more than you.
Definitely.
That's a big reason why America's had so much success as well, right? In the world championships, because of made attempts, in my opinion. We don't really see anyone from the States miss very often. In somewhat looks quite conservative on the platform, but they end up on the top of the podium, and that's what matters, right? Or in the highest position possible.
That's it. I've said it throughout the book, and I've said it so many times, but it's the truth. There is one day out of the year when you can become a champion. You can hit a PB 364 other days out of the year. So the PB should not be the objective. And I think, unfortunately, that a lot of people lose sight of that, and it causes decrements in performance. They fail to see that the ultimate prize at these high stakes meet is becoming the champion. Even, no, I mean, we all want to hit PBs, and yeah, that's at our core, and we should go after them. But you can only be a champion one day out of the year, and that's the bigger picture. That's the bigger prize. So,
Yeah. Going off the data that you've picked up, right? So you've got like 20 years of data. I'm not sure how much you've analyzed it, but have you seen trends in terms of made attempts over the course of time? So say, for example, like the past 10 years, like that percentage might have been lower because of the lack of information versus the recent 10 years.
yeah. So one statistic that's kind of glaring, is we look at bomb outs, right? And about almost 7% of all lifters bomb out of a competition. And that's about 10% for equipped and about almost 4%. It's like 3.7, I believe, for raw lifters. And so, and that makes sense, right? I mean, equipped, there's more performance variables based upon the tight equipment and so forth. And so it's understandable that there's going to be more bomb outs. Most of the data across the 22 years has not changed too much. And I've been careful to analyze low-level meets, regional meets, Arnold's, world championships, and just literally everything so that I can get a fair view of it. Most of the data doesn't change, but there seems to have been an uptick in the number of attempts made, to your point, in the past few years, just slightly, not much, but a little bit. And I think that is largely, to your point, probably because of the information superhighway, if you will. And because we are seeing more people who are placing an emphasis in game day strategy, in understanding that it's not just about maxing out, and people are arriving to competitions, armed with a team of qualified and capable coaches. So, the winners at the world championships, the people who win, average about 7.4 out of 9. So that's about an 82% success rate. That's pretty good, and I've always said, you literally, I mean, absolute standard of performance has to be 6 out of 9. I mean, you have to make 2 out of 3. You know what I mean? But really, you ought to be making at least one of your thirds. That's why I kind of say for us, the standard has got to be, for us, it's 7 attempts. I don't expect you to hit PBs or hit the thirds in every single discipline every time. Sometimes you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, whatever. But you've got to make at least one of your thirds. And for those who have a history of missing, clearly there's a disconnect. One of 3 things is either happening. You're either executing poorly, you're not able to assess and perceive your abilities and your limits, or it's a combination of both. And so if you're someone who consistently misses third attempts, you really ought to reevaluate, your execution and, of course, your planning and your strategy. So.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully that uptick continues to increase after, your book's come out only very recently, within the past weeks, right? So hopefully we get to see some time of that making its impact.
I hope so. I think one thing that you will find, and I mentioned this in the book, there's an uptick in successful attempts at competitions that go off of formula, like dots or good lift points. So these cash meets, these money meets, where lifters don't have to actually fit into a weight class. So they're not cutting as much, right? So they're able to adequately or more realistically assess their abilities, because largely they're basing their attempts off of, hey, this is what I actually hit in training versus this is what I hit in training, but I was 3 kilos over.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know what I mean? And I have that emotional attachment to what I did when I was heavy, and I'm still going to shoot for that, but I'm going to miss it because I cut weight. So there's an uptick in successful attempts made in some of these money meets where you don't have to weigh in. And that's good for sport in terms of, hey, more people are making more lifts. I mean, nobody wants to go out and see all the red on the score sheet. Any idiot can go out and miss a bunch of attempts. So from that standpoint, it's fun. I just personally am not crazy about having to pull out a calculator to figure out who's won a competition. And then, oh, by the way, you guys decide to change the metric in 3 years, and we plug it back in and all the winners are different, so that's why I like kilos head to head.
Have you got Have you got a prediction in your head? Not so much prediction, but what do you think about bomb outs and the bench rule for Worlds coming up?
That's going to be interesting, right? You never want judging to be the story of the competition. You want the athletes rising to the pinnacle of their abilities to be the story. You don't want judging either laxed or overly strict to become the narrative,
Yeah.
And I know in recent Europeans, we had some pretty high prominent lifters bomb out, on squat and so forth. I don't know what to expect in the bench, to be quite honest with you. I've seen some videos, and I'm sure you have on social media, where I'm looking at it and I'm like, really? That was deep enough?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it kind of, so it seems to me that we're still in this feeling out period where, and again, when you make something subjective, where it's really hard to tell when someone has a t-shirt on where the absolute center of their shoulder is. And so, it becomes a judgment call, much like depth. I mean, I'm a national level referee in America. One of the habits that I've always made when I'm sitting in the chair is when a lifter is at the chalk box, I immediately locate when they start walking, where's their hip crease? I just look for the hip crease immediately so that I'm not waiting until they begin to descend to find their hip crease. So I find it, I locate it. It's hard to locate that spot through a t-shirt and a singlet in the bench. So
Definitely.
all that is to say is that I think so far what I've observed in 2 very short months with limited competitions is it seems to be, I don't know, I think it's probably a little laxed if I say so, where there haven't been many bomb outs or called, attempts on bench press. So I really don't know what to expect other than the fact that in June at Raw World Championships, we will have had 6 months. So, maybe people become more keen to being able to judge the lift. I really don't know. I mean, sorry to ride the fence on that one, but I'm not really sure. I really hope that it doesn't become a storyline at Sheffield or a storyline at any of these meets. If just enforce it consistently. That you know what I mean? Just enforce. I personally, if you're going to change that rule, would have been a lot happier if you just would have changed the requirements of grip on the bar. That would have been easier, right? Just move it to instead of index finger, move it to pinky. Everybody has to be, that's just easier. If you want to eliminate people putting their feet up to arch, fine, you can do that. But then it's like, okay, they either did it or they didn't, versus, I have this interpretation. And, by the way, just the head judge, if everybody is positioned correctly, the side referees are looking at butt and hips and head and those things. They shouldn't be looking at elbow depth.
No.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just kind of my 2 cents on that whole situation. So I just hope it doesn't become a storyline.
So do we.
Yeah.
It's rough.
All right. Is that it?
Yeah.
We're done? That was good. That was probably one of my favorite podcasts. I really enjoyed
I'm ready
it.
to run through a wall.
Yeah, I think we can all agree we can't wait to watch Sheffield.
So is anybody from your team or outfit going to Sheffield or?
No, we don't have anyone this year going to Sheffield. Obviously, it'll be a goal of some people, some of our athletes, and Stephen here. Definitely be a goal of his, I'd say. But
of course,
I don't know. But I think we have a competition on here that day where we're actually basing the competition off GL points as well, or points. So less weight classes. So I think our competition will finish at about 4 o'clock, and then I'm pretty sure Sheffield will start a few hours after that.
Okay.
So we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, the eyes of the powerlifting world will hopefully be glued on that, singular moment, if you will. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. I'm happy to see it from the front row. But to my understanding, SPD has really done some nice things with the live stream. So the video and the quality of the production should be really high. I'm excited to see that too.
Oh, it's so good for the lifters.
Not to mention they made it free as well.
Yeah.
The eyes of the powerlifting world. We have the Arnold.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
free. They've made the live stream free, so
Oh, that's
definitely makes it
fantastic.
a lot more accessible.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. This past weekend, being in Texas coaching, from the front row. But I was just immersed in that, aspect of the powerlifting world. So I didn't realize that it was going to be free, but that's great.
Mm,
That's good.
definitely. All right. Well, thanks very much for coming on our podcast, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really
Yeah.
an honor. I appreciate the questions and the conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hopefully all of us will see you in June if you're going to be there. And
I'm not sure yet. It's a
Yep.
possibility. We'll just have to see.
Yep.
But yeah, I would love the opportunity to meet you all and shake hands and get some hugs. You know?
Love a hug.
Consider you all my extended powerlifting family. I mean, it's cliche, but it's like we're all in this together, right? And I think
Yeah.
anybody who genuinely appreciates the sport, for what it is, where we can always do one more rep or add one more kilo to the bar. It's like we're in this together, and it's like I want to see this high tide continue to raise all boats. And so I'm thankful for people like you putting podcasts like that, out into to the powerlifting world and community and just raising the level of information. And so, yeah, so I consider you all my extended powerlifting family, and hopefully we can cross paths one day.
Thanks very much, Matt. It was awesome to meet you.
Thank you,
so
Matt.
much.
Bye.
Cheers. Thank you.